First of all, I just wanted to ask you about some of your earlier stuff. Andrew Higson actually defined your early films as heritage films, like essentially Irish and kind of arguably some of the greater contributors to the Irish Indigenous template. In those early years, where were your influences coming from?
I'm not really quite sure. Mainly from literature. And
of course, there was the British realist movement as well, was happening around the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, I wasn't as much aware of that as I liked actually the films of people like Ingmar Bergman and some of the Italian more realistic films. But I also loved Fellini. But I'm not completely conscious of where it all came from. I know that when I was a teenager, I remember seeing on RTE Week in the Life of Martin Cluxton, which had a really strong effect on me.
Yeah.
Just from the point of view of making something that felt real and of its time and really reflected something that was very uniquely Irish. You know?
Yeah. You were, I suppose, one of the first to produce kind of avant-garde cinema in Ireland, and cinema that was kind of unconcerned with the traditional image of Ireland. But you have drifted back and forth between kind of present and historical representations of, say, things like masculinity or disenfranchised members of society. Does contemporary Irish film still interrogate those tropes, do you think?
I'm probably not the best person to ask. I think it does. Uses different techniques to do it. I think there is more of a push towards, even if one addresses those problems, that there's more of a push towards spectacle.
Yeah.
And something that might be slightly outrageously uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Which is.
But I guess it's
not really
more of a marketable
really
model now. Anyway.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to ask you about your relationship to John McGahern's work. What were the motivating factors for you in adapting his work for the screen and making those kind of artistic connections within Ireland?
I think, when I was, quite young, I read some of his novels. I read The Dark, and one or two other novels that he'd written. And for me, it was like a revelation. I just thought there was a kind of a sensuous truth about what he was writing, which I'd never really encountered before,
Yeah.
And particularly in The Dark, there was a lot of representations of what it was like to be a teenager in Ireland and stuff,
Yeah.
A kind of an underlying sense of brutality within the writing, but an amazing sensuality as well, which I offset sometimes the darkness of what he wrote. And then later, when he brought out a collection of short stories, which was called Nightlines, and two of the short stories, I ended up making as films. So almost by default one of them, and but Wheels was certainly something that I thought I might be able to manage on a very small budget. And then Korea just came out of the blue almost. It started as a short film, started to grow. I got some money from Germany. They wanted a longer piece than what I was proposing. Joe O'Byrne came in and opened it out, brought in the kind of love story elements, which weren't essentially in the short story, which is about 3 pages long. So, looking back on it now, I see that it's actually quite a romantic film.
Yeah. And of course, like, a lot has changed, in terms of funding and producing and distributing platforms that are available to filmmakers. You crowdfunded for Butterfly. That must have been a hugely liberating experience for you, having lived through the first and second film boards. And
yeah, well, I just felt, with Butterfly that, I probably would get put through a mincer if I sent it into the film board,
Yeah.
The length of it was a problem. And to be frank, and I'm not, this isn't a, a sweeping statement, but it's accurate enough that there are now legions of experts,
Yeah.
that can all take over your script or your thesis or your treatment, and everybody knows everything now. So it has become more difficult because one feels you're running a kind of creative gauntlet, and I really needed to go out and make something, and hence there was the funded scheme and route was the best for that particular film, and it was great because I just produced it myself,
Yeah.
with the help of my wife and Niall Queen and stuff, and we just went out. We went out and did it. I mean, it's not. Don't get me wrong, it's not ad hoc. I mean, it was fairly well planned and shot over 5 days, but it was very liberating.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Not to be looking over your shoulder, thinking like,
Yeah.
who's watching me now?
Yeah, or people trying to direct you in a certain way, or
Yeah.
There have been, I suppose, if we can call them like ups and downs in your career in terms of getting films off the ground, and after the success of Korea, that I guess there was even more money made available to make Love and Rage, but you've spoken about that being kind of a low point for you.
Yeah. I mean, the money for Love and Rage came pretty quickly, relatively speaking,
Yeah.
And suddenly I was into an area that I hadn't experienced before. It was, it was a monster of a thing which suddenly came down the road and hit me, basically.
Yeah.
I think there was a couple of problems. It was a kind of a European co-production, also with money coming from the Isle of Man. There were 2 or 3 producers on it,
Yeah.
There was money falling in and falling out of production on a daily basis, even while we shot,
Wow.
And even at stages, there was pressure on me to close it all down,
Yeah.
I knew if I closed it down, I would never resurrect it again,
Yeah.
And, I was working with a part German crew, a Polish cameraman. I mean, that was all good. But the pressure and the amount of stuff that comes with a bigger budget can actually be quite daunting and get in the way. Now, there are a lot of good things about it, but it can get in the way of actually, trying to find what you want to make, what's really important,
Mm-hmm.
And films at times can be, the more money there's in them, the more people are around who are quite willing and ready to help you spend it.
Yeah. If I could ask you to pick one moment in your career in terms of your filmmaking achievements, what would be the proudest moment for you? Off the top of your head, what springs to mind?
A day out on the lake in Cavan near Boy when we were shooting Korea.
Yeah.
And we had built this rig, and I was trying to find out how are we going to... Shooting on water is really difficult.
Yeah.
And I was looking through this monitor, and we had this filter on the lens. We were following 2 main characters out on a boat and through these reeds and stuff. And I thought, isn't this fantastic?
Yeah.
I just thought the freedom of it as well, and I think probably because the camera boat only had about 4 people in it,
Mm-hmm.
and the rest of the crew were on the bank, and I thought, this is freedom.
Escape, yeah. Yeah.
So I suppose maybe superficially that is the best one.
Yeah. Okay. And how does it feel now to have a week-long showcase celebrating your work?
Well, it feels a little bit kind of bizarre, to be honest with you. You feel like you're standing beside yourself.
Yeah.
And when I was approached about it, I was reluctant because I just didn't know whether I wanted it. and really whether I wanted to talk about the stuff just yet, because I want to do more things. I wouldn't like to think that it was like an obituary, but something that was because I'm still hoping to keep moving forward.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. That was my next question. What's on the cards for you now, or have you taken anything on board recently, or what's upcoming?
Well, I mean, I have a few things. One is a feature-length film, which has originated from John Banville and has gone through various redrafts and redrafts and redrafts. Hence, one of the reasons I needed to go out and make Butterfly.
Yeah.
And there's two documentary ideas that I'm trying to do at the moment, and nearly got money from the BAI, but was turned down just recently. So, you have to kind of pick your stuff up off the ground continuously and then just try again.
Yeah.
There's a lot more people looking for the same. Well, I mean, maybe the pots of money are bigger, but there's an awful lot more people looking for it. And the infrastructure and the amount of people around the whole industry of filmmaking, and media, is so enormous that it's almost suffocating, I think, at times. That to actually try and get something and push it through all of that stuff, is something else.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Cathal, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for talking to me, and very much looking forward to the weekend, and I hope you enjoy it, and take care.
Thanks very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks now, bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.